Greetings, it is I, Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue discussing the clans and bloodlines of Vampire the Masquerade in the World of Darkness. We last left off finishing up with the Sabbat clans. Let's talk about the independent clans, and start with the Assamites. Now the Assamites are, of course, as I said, one of the 13 clans. The disciplines they master depends on the caste they're from. Warriors master celerity, obfuscate, and quietus. A vizier may replace obfuscate with auspex, and possibly celerity with presence. A sorcerer, on the other hand, they all master Assamite sorcery, but then they have a combination of two other disciplines. There's three combinations of them, of auspex, obfuscate, quietus, and celerity, depending on various factors. Now they are based in the hidden fortress of Alamut in the Middle East. Western clans call them diablerists and assassins, but they really keep themselves separate from the jihad, the struggle of the vampires amongst each other. And in that retrospect, they are truly the only clan that has always been independent. They have remained and kept their independence the entire time of their existence. Now, the weakness shared by all three castes is they grow darker skinned while they age. But each of the three castes has their own smaller weakness. The warriors, they find themselves addicted to the vitae of other kindred. And regardless of whether they live with this addiction or commit to it, when someone would read their aura, they read as a diablerist. Even if they have never committed diablerie in their entire existence, they still read that way. The sorcerers, regardless if they practice it or have any knowledge of it, their aura reads that they practice some kind of blood magic, whether thaumaturgy or the Assamite's own version of a sorcery. It doesn't matter. Regardless, they read as that. The viziers, they all suffer from a obsessive compulsion dementia, based around one of their creative or intellectual abilities, that they become obsessed with knowing and mastering everything related to that. Now, unlike other clans, they have maintained their area fairly independent from them. So while the other clans competed with each other and found that in order to gain ground, they had to specialize, the Assamites didn't. They were all alone in the region they existed within, and therefore, hence, we have the different castes within them, that they developed different roles that almost filled the various roles that other clans were filling in as those clans competed. And their antediluvian, Hakim, kept them separate as much as he can. He remembered the second city and what had happened in the competition for mortals and herd, so he saw that keeping his blood separate from the rest of the kindred was a good thing. And so many of the major events that occurred, he would choose how the Assamites would get involved in it, with what was going on with the Romans and the Carpathians. He tended to try to keep them out of it as much as possible. But when numbers of his descendants got involved in these, it did upset him greatly. Eventually it upsetted him enough that he decided to no longer live in Alamut. He would begin to visit it occasionally until he stopped arriving altogether, seemingly abandoning his descendants, his blood. Now, as the Malkavians and Ventru gained power in Rome, and the various other empires that raised in the West came up, the Assamites tried to keep to themselves, even under the influence of the spread of things like Rome and the Byzantines. They looked to the Parthian Empire, which was a Middle Eastern empire, when they decided to get behind a group. Eventually, at its fall, though, under the influence of Roman coming into the territory, they did see influx of Western vampires trying to move into their territories. But they managed to hold them off for now. They maintained their own areas while keeping out the influence, the interlopers, so to say, from entering into their territories and from sort of gaining a foothold there. The Assamites remained strong for now. Now, the Dark Ages saw a turbulent time for the Assamites. By the end of it, they were unified. But for a time it looked like they would split apart. The influx of Islam caused major ripples within the clan. Many converted to Islam, this new religion at the time. And it seemed as though like the schism between the two of them would cause the clan to split, of the now Islamic Assamites and those that followed some of the older laws or other religions. It was the threat of the Bali returning and attempting to move into their territory that unified these groups once again against them. So the threat of demons worshipping and summoning vampires brought them back together. They eventually were able to stop the Bali, but at Chorazin, the Bali cursed the warrior castes that were there with a powerful curse that had them thirst for the blood, the vitae, of other vampires. The sorcerers and viziers tried their best to cure this, but by the end of the 14th century, every warrior was afflicted by this curse, and even the effects of it were seen within the other castes too. So their bloodline was cursed by the Bali by this. It also saw by the end of this era, of course, that the majority of Assamites eventually did become Muslim, worship Islamic teachings. This isn't to say that other faiths exist within the Assamites. They do. There are other bastions of groups which are kept within it that have other faiths, other belief systems, and even to this day they remain in existence. Just the majority of them converted. Now, the Crusades saw an excuse for Western vampires to bring their European invaders to go with them and invade the Middle East, the territory, the Assamites. These invasions were attempting to gain new ground, new influence in these areas that the Assamites always had strengths. Unfortunately, it did do some damage to the Assamites' infrastructure. They had built up these family groups of supporters, of herd, of retainers that had existed under them, and they lost lots of members of them in the battles and the wars. So things were being damaged in their infrastructure, but they did maintain themselves. Now, it is important to note that it was a sort of unspoken law, unwritten too, that the majority of times Assamites did not embrace women, up until pretty much around this time. There was always exceptions. It can always happen in anything that occurs, but for centuries, they just sort of officially didn't embrace them. The War of the Princes changed things, though. Not only did it allow their policies to change, it was during this time that the three castes solidified their existences. That they had always sort of existed within the clan. Now they were considered castes within it. They had separated themselves out finally. Yet they still did remain one clan. Now, Western vampires did not see what the Assamites were. They could only see the warriors, the Diablerists, the assassins. And so they were considered a low clan during the Dark Ages when it came to relations to other vampires. Now, the Inquisition's effects didn't really touch much of the Middle East, of the Holy Lands and the Ottomans, but it did see something that occurred. When the Anarch Revolt began, many anarchs fled to the Middle East. And they did find actual allies with the Assamites. The Assamites decided to help them because of the way they had been treated by Westerners up until now, the Western vampires. Eventually, though, with the founding of the Camarilla, the majority of these anarchs went back to them after everything was said and done, those that had fled to the Middle East, which unfortunately caused a lot of anger within the Assamites. They saw the allies they had deserting themselves. It was a lone Nosferatu discovering Alamut's secret location that caused the end of all this. The Camarilla were able to force a treaty, the Treaty of Tyr, and forced the Assamites to allow the Tremere to blood curse them. Many saw that this was only containing the threat of these Assamites that had turned against them. When the Ottomans attacked Europe, they went with them and hoped to basically go after the inner councils of the Camarilla and destroy them. The warriors put themselves forward as the sorcerers and the vizier hid themselves away in Alamut and continued to research a way to undo some of the curses and dangers that had been placed upon their warriors. Their warriors began to become assassins, to basically sell themselves for blood out in the world. And they did this actually on purpose. The guise of it was to hide the sorcerers and viziers. You would only know about the assassin Assamites going out there in the world. And that was the point of it. To hide those that were looking to undo the curses placed upon them so that they could get some measure of their version of justice in the long run. Now, the Victorian Age did not fare well for the Assamites. The majority of them kept to Alamut, kind of hiding near that, keeping to their small territories. But with European expansion into many areas, there are countries that even fell to their control. With Egypt, they managed to take it over, and of course, with the Europeans came the vampires of that same blood, the Western vampires, and basically replacing the Assamites' infrastructure in some of these areas, crushing a lot of their power. Fortunately for them, they always looked down to the Ravenos, which fared much worse during this time period than them. So though they had a horrible Victorian Age, they weren't the worst. It means also they were kept loosely out of most of what was going on in kindred society. They were to themselves. Now in the modern night, ur-shulgi, one of Hakim's childe, awoken from Topor, one of the most powerful sorcerers there was. He managed to break the Tremere curse on the Assamites. Now the Bali curse is another thing entirely. But that was when they'd learned to live with for some centuries before then. Terrible. But the curse basically from the Tremere, the most limiting factor on them, was broken. He took his place as effective master of Alamut, as being the most powerful elder that was there. And he had very strict interpretations of the laws of Hakim, the laws of their antediluvian, which caused a schism within the Assamites. Ur-shulgi saw that the clan should worship only Hakim, their progenitor, as the true god of their clan. He did not like the fact that they worshipped, especially the Islamics, because they were the majority in there, and he killed many. This schism caused a portion of the Assamites to effectively defect from them. A great portion of sorcerers and viziers turned to the Camarilla. They were fairly well welcomed. They were different from their other Assamite brethren, and their existence wasn't really known anyway. These were interesting fellows that actually provided powerful services to the Camarilla. Some warriors did go with them, but they were always seen as loose cannons of the Assamites. There were a number that did join the Sabbat too. Those were mainly warriors. Unfortunately for them, they were not as well welcomed. The reason being that for 500 years, the Assamite anti-tribute had been from the warrior caste. So you'd think it would be a good connection. But when the curse was broken, a large portion of those elder anti-tribute returned to the main clan, including the Black Hand, one of the Sabbat's most elite groups. Meaning they had just been abandoned by a large portion of their power. So why do you think they would welcome these Assamites that some of them had already abandoned them? They sort of did. Now, of course, some Assamites did stay with the clan, a majority of them, in fact. And there were those that also did go independent, that went off on their own to explore the world on their own. It is important to note that those that stayed with the clan are most likely on the path of blood. Now, by tradition, Alamut was ruled by the eldest, the most eldest of vampires within the clan at the time. He was supported by the Duat. They were a group that was effectively made from the elders of the various castes. These groups effectively ruled over it. The Council of Scrolls was there to introduce new technologies into the Assamite, while the Council of the Duat I was talking about, were the ones that enacted the policies of the Assamites. Now let's talk about clan variants. There are a number of clan variants that exist out there, but I do want to mention something specifically special. The two other castes. When we talk about Assamite and use the basic systems that exist, we are using the warrior caste. That means when you're making a normal Assamite character, you're considered making a warrior. If you wish to make a sorcerer or vizier, you're going to treat them as the clan variants I'm going to talk about now. That's effectively what they are. Variants to the clan in a way, even though technically speaking, all three of them are the Assamite clan. It's just they are more unusual to have as players, and hence treated like this. Now in the modern days, their main disciplines are Assamite sorcery, obfuscate, and quietus. This caste came about in response to the dark magics of the Bali to create an own magic in order to counter against them. They have taken influences from another of other spiritual cultures in order to form this sort of magic, from things in Hindu faith to Chinese faith. They see that they have to enter an altered state in order to use their sorcery, whether this means through drugs, other uses of like torment, either both physical or psychological, doing all these various things that alter their states and allow them to use their magics. And of course, their weakness is a lust for magical power, just something in them that they required learning new and important magics. That is why their auras reflect this magic to them, because their want of it that seems to always exist there is deepened within their very essences. So similar to how the warriors are more obsessed with blood, they are obsessed with magic. The viziers use auspex, celerity, and quietus. They are the least known and the least populous of all of the castes. They're in fact interesting because they form similar to what a Toreador does, that they have an obsession. They have these obsessions, and it functions much the same way, except they're more obsessed about basics of information, learning, discovering things. Now, when it comes to the caste culture, many of the castes work together very well. Viziers, on the other hand, were different. They were much more individualistic than any of the other ones. Of course, as I said, their aura will reflect their madness, their obsession. So they like to find themselves away from others, to reflect upon their obsessions, that they just dive into the information. With the schism that occurred, where the warriors were sort of known to the Camarilla, and occasionally the sorcerers would sort of be known. We were considered part of the same clan, but slightly different. You'd see some knowledge of the sorcerers exist within the Camarilla, probably not widespread, that they were a group that existed. The viziers were all but unknown. Now, numbers of them have turned to the Camarilla. These are very different than the Assamites anybody knows about. And many of them now have seemingly embraced this culture within the Camarilla, this social culture, to varying degrees of success. But it's a different kind of culture than working with each other, which they never quite did well. Then again, there are still plenty of them that have kept to themselves and their obsessions. Now, the Assamite anti-tribu are unique. They are all but the same as a warrior caste member, except they did not suffer the curse of the Tremere. It is speculated that perhaps something that happened with the curse of the Bali that occurred allowed them to avoid it when they basically turned to the Sabbat. Now, the Assamites were effectively the assassins of the Sabbat, and found themselves in that role for quite some time. They actually had a special Diabolist ritual that was given to them by the Sombra, that effectively the eldest of them was, after about 100 years, diabolized by the next one down it, and replaced then for the exact same role, the Hulu. Well, this lasted up until more the modern era, with the breaking of the Tremere curse. A number of these elders, including the current Hulu, were defected back to the main clan, returned to it. They'd originally fled here to avoid the Tremere curse. That was one of the main reasons some of these powerful Assamites had fled there. Now they were free to return back to their original clan. They were no longer fearful of it. Conversely, many of the new younger Assamites, fearing the might of the eldest and his draconian laws, fled to Sabbat. Now, the Banu Hakim were a specifically group of Islamic Assamites that existed in northern Africa during the Middle Ages. They were the ones that were uniting the vampires in those areas in order to face back against the might of the European influence in there, effectively to try to keep it Islamic. They made peace with those other groups in order to do it in this area. They've effectively morphed in with the main group now, that they aren't an independent group within it, though for a time period they acted independently. Since the majority of the clan did eventually become Islamic, that is why they sort of moved back in. Now, the Bedouins are actually a group of nomadic warrior castes that practice animalism from northern Africa. They wander the wastes of the Sahara and other areas like that. They use ghoul animals on their sides and basically hunt for the very few that live out there. They enjoy their nomadic lifestyle away from all the others, separated out from all the kind of cultures that exist out there, with their own practices. But they still are loyal to Alamut, and still members of the clan, which is important to note. Couriers are a group of viziers that existed during the Byzantine Empire that favored presence over celerity. They were involved with the Byzantine Empire directly in its politics. Many of them have effectively died out. Their bloodline has been passed on, though, technically, with about two dozen of this bloodline actually still in existence to today. The Assamites have greatly kept themselves of the politics of other kindred, pretty much successfully, up until, of course, the mechanized transportation and communications have existed nowadays. They still try to keep themselves out of this political arena, though there are a number of viziers that have pushed themselves into it, with varying degrees of success. It is just that the Assamites as a whole are very inexperienced when it comes to the politicking of the kindred world. As I've said, Assamites are divided into 3 castes that share the fact that they all get darker with age, and each of them seems to have this weakness that stems from Quietus. Quietus themselves has been cursed. That was the effect of the Bali curse. That was an obsession. While with the warrior caste's obsession for vitae, each of the other castes has their own version of an obsession that exists within it. And as you can only be sired by the same caste, like the caste type, the warrior, vizier, or sorcerer that sires you, you will be that type. You cannot be another type. So there has been this separation from Hakim. They all believe themselves child of Hakim, and effectively his bloodline, and that is why they retain themselves as the same clan of Assamites. And they also share the fact of that Quietus connection, and the way that it affects them. Though the obsessions are different, they still feel it's a connection. Now, an important ritual they have is that they have their meetings. They're sort of settling down before the morning hour comes, called Diwakana, after something from Kurdistan. That they have that to have their small meetings, discussions, and stuff before dawn. Outsiders are not welcome to these meetings at all. And should you get an invite, you're actually getting something that is very special when it comes to your relating to the clan. You're seen as being a very honored guest. Now, warriors are the primary fighters of the clan themselves. They are its assassins, they're soldiers. They're likely to follow the path of blood more than anything else. Now, younger warriors that are embraced tend to come from Islamic cultures and will mix the path of blood with Islamic teachings to become almost fanatical to the clan. Elders tend to be more mixed and can come from more than one faith or kind of background, and are much less inclined to go about any of these sort of methods. Now, Assamites, when they embrace someone, they usually take time to sort of observe them and find out about them. A quick embrace could occur, but it is very rare. Anti-tribute Assamites tend to be more of these quick embraces, and then they can spend periods of time basically training them and apprenticing them into the clan. They embrace people that are useful to the clan, oftentimes looking to those that are going to be ready to die for the clan's goals. When the time period of the Tremere Curse occurred, they actually did also look for those that were experts in various fields in order to help them break the curse. Now, Assamites try to embrace those with obsessive personalities because they see this as an important trait, whether this is related to hunting down someone or obsessing over certain amounts of information. When they are embraced in the clan, they are seen to push forward that obsession as being part of the entire idea of their obsessed with maybe hunting down a target if they are more in the warrior clans, or finding the correct information if they are more of the sorcerer or vizier caste. Now, the majority of Assamites come from North African and Middle Eastern descent, that they are embraced from there, though there are some from the surrounding areas in more Central Asia, some Europe, some otherwise. Farther Western Europe and Far Eastern are not unheard of to be embraced to Assamite, but they are not common at all. They are barely uncommon, you could say it. They're more rare indeed. Now, to say that all Assamites are Muslim is incorrect too. The vast majority of them are. But there are some elders that practice other various religions, from Christianity to Zoroastrianism to others. This means that you could very well be an Assamite from some other religious group, that you do not have to be Muslim. It's just that the vast majority of them are going to be Muslim. When warriors embrace, they focus on physical skill. They focus on the power that they have. So they oftentimes focus only on men. For a lot of times they did. Women nowadays, you do find some that have appropriate skills, either because maybe perhaps they disguise themselves as men, or they have a skill related to being a warrior that seems very appropriate. You can find women warriors. It is just very rare in comparison to the men. It is a much smaller degree of them. On the other hand, the viziers and sorcerers are not focused around the physical body, the abilities of being, physical. They're focused more on the mind, so they're more open to these different things. Unfortunately, that means when they're drawing from a culture that doesn't have as many women getting into these positions of learning, they had problems finding them. They were more men, but they looked not necessarily to the information that you had, but your ability to learn and grow with this information, which this type of obsession, this type of choice in those that they were embracing, allowed more of an example of different people, including women, to be embraced into these castes. Because of these differences, you also find differences in the type of people they obsess for, especially for age. Warriors tend to embrace those that are young, at peace physical conditions. They occasionally will embrace an older human if they have some kind of specialized skill that takes years to learn, something that they developed over their lifetimes that would be key and vastly important to being embraced within the Assamite. On the other hand, sorcerers and viziers, because they do focus on the mental, more often than not focus on choosing those that have learned much, that have become experts in field, and tend to pick from older stock. The Assamites have gone through vast amounts of differences. Originally, they were just the assassins in first edition, and it was second edition that you started seeing the hints of the sorcerer castes. It wasn't until the early editions of Vampire Dark Ages that you saw the introduction of the 3-caste system. When it came to the revised edition, you did have a vizier, but they were really the sorcerers. They really were a 2-caste system in that one, with a third caste being actually optional that they've barely talked about. The next revision of the Dark Ages added all 3 castes together and made them not optional. These times saw changes to both their weaknesses over the time, basically the evolution of it and the way that they were obsessed with it, and the changes in the various disciplines that each of the castes would use. Of course, the warriors have pretty much remained the same, but the other 2 castes have sort of evolved in the disciplines that they would be using. The 20th anniversary saw the largest sort of influx of changes, leading into what is now the modern version, which I've talked about here. That is what we kind of come in here with the majority of everything being cemented in the 3-caste system and the various weaknesses they have to their blood and various disciplines. Still, all of them grow darker with age. So that's it for today. I introduce you to the Assamite, a clan thought to be only assassins, but more complex and richer than you'd think. It has 3 castes, equal in the clan, yet seemingly all different, each of them filming a different role. And because they were so fiercely independent in an area where they did not compete, they were able to develop this way. 3 clans in one. 3 phases of a bloodline, all combined together. In this modern age, they have managed to survive and retain their independence, though now you may see some of them in other groups. The Assamite as a whole remain themselves. Still obsessed, each of them obsessed with a portion of their main discipline, quietus. Part of it draws them to their obsession. But each of them also mastering a portion of themselves. Sorcerers, viziers, warriors, each of them a powerful portion of the clan. So if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.